Hey everyone, it's Joe from Gadgetry Tech, and in today's video we're going to talk about the Corsair Virtuoso Pro. This is a $200 analog audiophile grade open back gaming headset. Now this is geared towards audiophiles and gamers. It's a more premium product, and because of that I'm going to be comparing it to other audiophile headphones in this price range. As soon as they start advertising that you can use this as just a really high quality open back headphone to use something like a Wavelink or the Wave microphone from Elgato, for example, I now have to start comparing it against other audiophile headphones. So I will be comparing it to the Beyerdynamic Tiger 300R, the Drop PC38X, EPOS H6 Pro Hybrid, Sennheiser 560S, and the Drop Sennheiser HD6XX. I'll probably make references to a couple others along the way, but just to give you an idea what to expect. Now, full disclosure, one of these was sent to me for review, the other one was not. I purchased one because I wanted to compare driver matching. That's been a thing with Corsair in the past. I wanted to ensure that these perform the same to each other, but also get as much time as I can and provide fair and unbiased coverage. So it won't affect what I say about it, whether it's sent to me or not. That really just helps me with timing, but I do want to share that. Now, if by the end of the video you decide you want to purchase one of these, I will have links in the description below to take you to Amazon. It does help support the channel, but by all means, purchase it where you feel comfortable. That's just a way of helping fund purchases like these. Now, the Virtuoso Pro comes with an awesome carrying case because it's slim. I love cases like this because you either have to commit to one design or another when you do a headset, and that's either like the folding and collapsing headset, like what I got with the Acone Aspire, or something like this where the headset lays flat. So if you open it up, it's not just like you put the headset in there and there's a little pouch for it. It just slides right in, and look at that, it's all snug. It's gonna make the headset hold up better over time, and it won't get kind of dinged up moving around or scuffed on the finish. And then you have this little Velcro pouch, if you will. It's like a mesh pocket that contains all the wires. So let's talk about what is included. Now, you really get two cable options in the box, and one of them comes with a mic, one of them doesn't. Corsair is also going to be selling a balance connection, but before you go ahead and add that to your cart, stay tuned for the cable discussion because I want to discuss that in a little bit more detail. So you have a stereo option. Now, this is going to turn this into a normal headphone. There's no volume controls or anything on the headset, so this is as basic as it gets. You have one jack that's going to go into anything with a headphone jack, whether it be a dongle for your phone, a computer, game controller, you name it. And these are 3.5 millimeter ports on the end. It's a universal connection, and I will talk about how you can swap that out. Now, the second cable they give you also has this really nice fabric coating on it. It feels premium, but when we get into the microphone side, it's basically a 3.5 millimeter connection again, but now you have this flexible mic. And they even give you a little foam sock in case your microphone gets cold. In all seriousness, it is removable, and that's designed to help reduce plosives. Now, if you look closely at the mic, there is a larger opening and a smaller opening. The smaller opening is for the back of the mic. That helps with some passive noise isolation, and the larger opening is for where you want facing your mouth. Now, they also include a TRRS breakout cable, which turns this combo jack, which is like a 4-pole plug, into a stereo jack for your headphone and a separate jack for your microphone. Now, even though it's nice that these cables are coated in fabric and they look good and feel good, everything seems premium, except there's one issue with this cable, and it's one of the problems I have with this headset or headphone, depending on what wire you use, and it's when you have a rough material on the cable, it can rub against your shirt or whatever you're wearing and generate something called microphonics. The same idea of using a styrofoam cup and string to talk to your neighbor. So if you're not playing anything on this and you move around and that cable brushes up against your shirt, you're going to hear a lot of noise transferred into the headset. I do not like using the stock headphone cable because of that. Usually there's two ways around this. You either have a rubber cable, or some headset and headphone companies, they will actually angle these plugs. So with the Corsair Virtuoso Pro, the plugs go straight down. So when I wear this, instead of the cables being angled forward, which helps clear my shirt and greatly reduces microphonics, it's pointed straight down. I think they were doing that for more of the symmetrical look to make it look a little bit more premium, but that's just a byproduct of it. So if you're using it as a stereo headphone, I recommend replacing this with a rubber cable. And I'll have a link in the description for an example. If you are using the microphone though, you're kind of stuck with dealing with the microphonics. You won't hear it in game if something is playing loudly, and whatever game you're playing, honestly, if there's enough noise, or if you're just sitting still enough, you're not going to hear any noise anyway. It's not like it's generating noise that doesn't exist. Now, I want to show you something I really like about the jack design. One, I love that it's a 3.5 millimeter and not proprietary. I was nervous it was proprietary at first because you have this like oddly shaped plug on the left ear cup. And I was like, oh man, they made it so I had to buy their cables. Not a fan. However, it's actually a pretty smart design, and it's for the microphone. So when you insert this, it's to keep the microphone from spinning and rotating on the ear cup, helping keep it in the right place. Now this twists, so you have to still make sure it's angled correctly, but this is a really nice, convenient feature. Now also, because it's analog, that means you can run any spatial audio you want. If you're connecting this to a PlayStation 5, then you can use the Tempest 3D audio, and on Xbox you can use Atmos and pretty much any format that's compatible on Windows, because it's the host that's doing all the spatial audio. So don't worry about if it works with 3D audio or not. And because this is geared more towards an audiophile product, there's no volume adjustment on the headset or headphone. There is a microphone mute switch. It's this little textured toggle, which again, because it keeps it from swiveling on the ear cup, I like that that's there, but that's about it. A lot of times volume control has introduced more issues than help, and if they're marketing it towards other premium products, I think they're trying to maintain the best possible sound quality, you know, maintain driver matching from left and right and all of that. Now the Virtuoso Pro uses a graphene driver, just like the same driver technology that I reviewed on the Logitech G Pro X2 wireless. And recently I reviewed the Apos Caspian headphone, which is a $500 dynamic open back headphone. No mic, but that too used graphene coated drivers. So why graphene? Well, you hear titanium, you hear aluminum, you hear biocellulose or cellulose drivers. All kinds of material choices can impact the way the driver sounds and what you hear for both music and gaming. Graphene is starting to be used a little bit more because it's kind of more at the molecular level, and when this driver is built, it has exceptionally lightweight and high rigidity while not having a really annoying resonance. So basically this comb material allows you to push higher volumes without distortion because there's less flex or distortion in the driver. It's an excellent driver material choice. It doesn't mean it's going to sound better, but it's certainly a good foundation. Now I mentioned this being easy to drive earlier, and at 32 ohms with 114 decibel sensitivity rating, this is frankly the loudest open back gaming based product I have ever plugged into a controller. So if you are a controller player and you like the idea of an open back, but also like it loud, the Virtuoso Pro can be driven pretty much with anything. Now, one of the first things you notice, aside from that new product odd smell when you unzip that pouch, is the build quality. And the Virtuoso Pro feels absolutely insane in hand. It's the perfect blend of plastics, metals, and soft materials in the right places. I don't want to talk about the design just yet because that's more of a subjective thing, and I'll get into that. But just some examples. So you have headsets that rotate and swivel and all this other stuff. And a lot of times when you hit the end of the rotation, you can feel some extra flex. Like you know there's a plastic stop or something a little bit cheaper there to make it stop, and it has some give. This feels so much more solid. Like the hinges feel almost industrial strength for how well everything is put together right here. It's a noticeable difference if you've ever owned a different headset that has a swivel. This feels more premium. The other little attention to detail things is they have little rubber stops here behind the yoke. So when this headset or ear cup rotates against it, it's hitting that rubber stop and you're not hearing any noise. The end result is a very quiet headset when you're moving around, putting it on your head. There's no odd flex issues or anything that makes you concerned if this is going to hold up. If there's been only a few headsets that I can say will honestly last the test of time and feel really solid, the initial build feel of this makes me feel like it's going to go quite a long time. Now, I mentioned the drawback of the 3.5 millimeter jacks pointing straight down because of the microphonics issue, but the other one that was kind of a pain, at least initially for me, was I couldn't tell which side was left and right at night. So there's a little R and a little L, which is pretty normal, but usually there's some other kind of indicator, especially on a gaming headset, of what side is what. Or on the audiophile products, they have an asymmetrical design on the ear cup or the plugs are angled forward. So with this one, it wasn't so much the case. So what I found is because this rotates fully in one direction and only partly on the other, the easiest way to check if it's in stereo mode is just to rotate the cups. And whatever side is flat, that is the side that's going to rest on your chest. Now I want to talk about these exterior grills because this is one of my favorite design elements of any gaming product I think I've ever reviewed. I absolutely love these grills. Between the triangular spoke design, this mesh, it's kind of like, it's a signature Corsair look. You know it's a Corsair product, but it looks so high end. And you even have this nice little chamfered like metal edge to it that catches the light once in a while just right. It's super subtle, so it looks very classy. Aside from the Corsair logo, you wouldn't convince me that this is a gaming company's product. It's very, very understated. Now, there's a little bit of a groove right here at the bottom of the ear cup, and that's because these grills are removable. It's pretty easy to pop off after you've done it once. I've obviously messed with this quite a bit. Now, this serves as a couple purposes. They may release custom grills down the road. I don't know if it's mainly for that, to, you know, make it your own, but it can also help for cleaning this out. Maybe someone's going to get crafty and do their own mods. The more you look at this headset and appreciate all the design choices, everything feels premium. All the product, all the materials they use, how they laid it out and everything, it just seems really smart. So normally I don't focus too much on that, but when you pick this up and feel how it feels compared to most gaming products or even audiophile headphones in this price, they really knocked it out in the park on build quality. It's one of my favorite things about it. Now on the inside of the pad, they also have this perforated leatherette. So you can see there's a lot of detail and knowledge, frankly, on how to make a high quality pad, which is removable. Now there's no replacement pads yet, but this is really nice to make it this serviceable. There's a really nice sealed gasket design, so it won't be leaky. And because of this soft felt material, it's gonna help reduce any kind of rattles or things like that. You can see the baffle design is straight, and they even have different cutouts for audio tuning again. It's a graphene driver, so it's black, which is kind of cool. It's not too shiny or reflective. Now I want to talk about the pads real quick because it's important to cover dimensions, and we have 55 millimeters of width and just about 60 millimeters of height. So the pad depth though, this is the interesting part. So it's about 15 or 16 millimeters, which is more shallow. And if I compress the pad inside, I'm getting closer to 20 millimeters. By design, this pad has your ear rest on the baffle. Now the baffle's padded with this acoustic fleece, which serves two purposes, one for comfort, one for tuning the sound. It's the same idea of what Beyerdynamic does with the Tiger 300R. So if you don't like your ears touching the baffle, at the time of this review, there are no different or deeper pad options out there. It uses a fabric material, which is unlike every other gaming headset I've reviewed that I can recall. It's not even the same fabric as the Corsair HS80. It's not the same sport fabric as something like SteelSeries or Wicked Cushion. It's a tighter weave, and you can hear that's a little bit scratchy. Now I think they did this to help balance two things. One, this fabric has a really nice job at creating a seal to help with bass response, which is really important and needed on an open back, especially one designed for gamers. But this also is still very breathable. Now going into the weight, it's a fairly light headset at 336, 334 grams. So you won't really feel too much pressure on your head or weight from it. It doesn't have a lot of electronics, and it's a relatively lightweight design. Now looking at the headband design, both pieces are removable, and I like what they did. So again, this might be for future customization and color options down the road, but all I have to do is slide this to the left towards the C, and then I expose the top. This is all plastic, which is totally fine. I think it's to keep the weight down. The important part is they are using metal in the hinge area, with this being metal here, which is flexible. Now removing this is more difficult. You basically have to kind of squeeze this headset together, which forces the tabs out, and then once that's done, you can remove it. So this might again be for either accessorizing or just replacing if it wears over time, and that exposes the plastic inside. Now, as far as the telescoping yoke goes, this is metal, and this is gonna lead me into comfort. Because this is metal and how far it comes out, some people are going to like or dislike this clamp force, which is a little bit stronger than some, but it's not terrible. I think it's comparable to something like the Razer Black Shark V2 Pro. So if you find the comfort too strong or the clamp is too strong, because of this design, if you ever want to stretch these and reduce the clamp force, you do it here. So basically almost like you're bending this piece only outward. You don't ever grab it and bend it this way because that will break the headset. But doing it like this and kind of rocking it open, I actually just straightened it a little bit. And now as a result, when I put this on my head, I have less clamp force than before, and it's a lot more comfortable for me. So you can adjust that. This is the same thing with something like the Sennheiser 6XX. Now, even in stock form, I didn't find the clamp force too bad. In fact, having a pretty consistent clamp can help with consistent sound quality. Now, I wore these for hours at a time because I've been using it for when I listen to music and work my day job, and then, of course, gaming at night. I never found that this was the most comfortable headset I've ever worn, and it doesn't help that I just reviewed the Rig 900, which is the most comfortable headset I've ever worn. I can wear this for a very long period of time, and I have a little bit of extra heat on my ear because of the shallow ear cup design. It's like I have a soft, breathable blanket on my ear. So the ears are getting warmer, but they're not sweating because this material is breathable. The one nice thing about this fabric is it's incredibly compliant for more of a pinpoint pressure. This is very important for people who wear glasses. So if you are concerned with glasses comfort, this particular pad with this material is excellent. I could wear my thickest frame glasses I had, and this was very, very comfortable even for longer listening.
Now this is what my voice sounds like on the Corsair Virtuoso Pro microphone. Now it's wired, so I don't have the compression issues with wireless. It sounds very clear, however, it's not voiced as warmly as some other Corsair mics even, or if you compare it to the Black Shark V2 Pro, for example. They have a larger capsule and therefore they sound a little bit warmer. This capsule loses a little bit of the bass, but it is clear. I think it's just voiced to be a little bit harsh sounding. Not the end of the world if you're on PC because you can fix it with Sonar, but I just wanted to present it. I think this is still a good mic. It's just not like podcast level. So what I'm going to do now is turn on Sonar's EQ and change the microphone sound profile so you can hear what it can sound like as an example. So with no other changes, I didn't boost or reduce volume. This is just changing the EQ. So I have 100 Hertz lifted at 4 decibels with a Q of 0.707. At 1800 Hertz, I did minus 3 dB at 1.5 Q. This area is kind of what's taken away some of the harshness as that you were hearing before. Then at 8 kilohertz or 8000 Hertz, I did minus 3 decibels with a Q of 5. This little notch I did is a little bit more for my own voice because I kind of have a hard S. My voice can be sibilant at times, and this takes the edge off. Now this is just to give you a baseline example of how microphone EQ works. You can obviously tune it to your own liking. Just keep recording yourself and play it back and see if you like it. This microphone's clean. It's just depending on the EQ if you like it or not, but at least you know how it sounds on console versus PC. And of course positioning it. If it's farther away from your mouth, you're going to lose a little bit of warmth, and if it's closer, it sounds warmer and louder and full because of the proximity effect, but you're more susceptible to plosives. So if you have a hard P or you breathe into the mic, more people are going to hear it. The windsock helps a little bit, but it still doesn't reject too many plosives. So anyway, that is what the mic sounds like.
All right, now it's time to talk about sound quality, my favorite part, and we are going to start with the objective side or the measurement side. I have a rig that I measure every headset I review. I haven't uploaded every single one to this website yet, but this is free. I have a lot of headsets here, and I'll have a link in the description below in case you want to compare on your own. So looking at the frequency response, you can see that there is a lift. It's not a bad measurement, by the way. I'm going to start with that. This measures really well, especially being a purely analog headset. So there is a lift in the bass region as you approach the upper bass and low mid range. And as a result, out of the box, this headset or headphone is somewhat boxy sounding. It sounds kind of thick and very warm. Now the rest of the mid range is fine. There is a scoop at 1.5 kilohertz or so, which is pretty normal for a lot of open backs. This is kind of a pretty stock or traditional tune because that little dip at 1.5 helps create more sense of space in the higher frequencies for your soundstage. This dip is really minor, and as a result, it's not really hurting things like string instruments. So if you are using this to listen to guitars or in a lot of rock, it's still going to do a good job at getting the details from your guitar out. Now, where this headset can sound dark to some people is in that whole 4 to 6 kilohertz region. There is a big scoop here, and this is kind of where your pinna or your ear cartilage amplifies the sound the most. It's where you're most sensitive. So there is a huge variance in what people prefer in this region. Now the 8K peak is pretty minor. It's lifted just slightly. You can see this little spike here, but it's not really significant, and things don't sound sharp or sibilant with this headset. I'm a little sensitive to the 8K region, so I tend to pull it down by a couple decibels, but don't feel like you need to. Just kind of play with it and see how it sounds. Now the way this is tuned in the high frequencies is it's rolled off. So again, this whole idea of this particular tune out of the box is thick, heavy, dark, like I was saying earlier. Don't expect a really bright, airy soundstage. It sounds a little bit more closed off, but it's still good enough for like fatigue-free listening. There's nothing overly offensive here. Thankfully, with graphene drivers and the way this is built, you can EQ it to really kind of sound the way you want. Now, if you are using EQ on PC and you're using Sonar to do your EQ, they added a new feature to share presets. So I'm going to have a link in the description below where if you have Sonar installed and running on your computer already, all you have to do is click this link in the description. It's going to do this pop-up just like this, and you can label the preset wherever you want. Mine says Corsair Virtuoso by Gadgetry Tech, which is already in here, so I'm just going to close this. And if I turn it on, you can see what it looks like. All I did was I lifted the sub bass just slightly. I took 20 hertz and lifted it by 1 dB with a Q of 0.707. This one is there, but I'm not using it. So if you're making your own from scratch, don't feel like you have to add this band. At 120 hertz, I did minus 2 decibels with a Q of 1.5. At 200 hertz, I did minus 4 decibels with a Q of 1.2. Now, if I go all the way up here in the upper frequencies, I did lift the 1.5 kilohertz region a little bit, or 1500 hertz, only by a decibel with a Q of 2. Going to 5 kilohertz, I lifted it by 3 decibels with a Q of 0.707, minus 2 dB at 8 kilohertz with a Q of 4, which is more narrow. And then this one is interesting. I want to point out it's a high shelf. So on Sonar, you can choose which way you want to adjust the sound. High shelf means that basically everything past that point is going to be lifted. I did that at 2 decibels from 13,000 hertz or 13 kilohertz with a Q of 0.707. This is tuned to perform really well both in gaming and music, and if you can apply this EQ, I strongly recommend trying it. If you're on a fixed band equalizer like for console use or Dolby Atmos, just take the 250 hertz, subtract 3 dB, go to the 120 hertz, subtract 2 dB, and then you can boost 4K by 3, like I said, and go to 8K and reduce by 1 or 2. Then at your 16 kilohertz, boost it by 2. I know I just kind of verbally spit it out, but that should give you close to this tune even without using Sonar. Now, there is a key thing I want to point out with the Virtuoso Pro, one last thing on the measured side, but this is huge, and that's driver matching. Driver matching is when the left speaker and the right speaker behave the same way if they're getting the same frequency. Games are built to assume the left and right is identical. So when you're trying to track an enemy through a wall and you're hearing footsteps, or if you're playing a single player game and a bird or something flies by or rolls by, it's supposed to be a cohesive movement in your virtual audio space. And poor driver matching breaks that, and that's why headsets that don't have good driver matching are not as good for FPS games or stuff where positional accuracy is important. This headset has incredible driver matching, partly because it's an open back, so there's less variations of what's inside the ear cup. There's no batteries or electronics, and also because of the graphene drivers, which have a really tight manufacturing tolerance. So as a result, this is the best Corsair headset ever made for FPS. I typically am not a huge fan of Corsair headsets for competitive play because of the driver matching. So I think a lot of the people out there that are sponsored by Corsair are absolutely going to love the Pro. This image is exceptional, and that does play into music as well. You can have music that can have a vocal that is dead center in your head and sounds like it's very intimate and personal. And then if you're listening to a live acoustic performance or some symphony hall recording, you still get a sense of space because it's building that virtual soundstage more accurately in your head. So huge kudos to Corsair. This is a massive improvement. Now moving on to my experience for actual gaming and music listening. Out of the box, I'm not a huge fan of the sound signature, only because even though I like a slightly warmer presentation, this carries a little bit too much into the mids for me, and as a result, that whole boxiness I was talking about, it skews voices. It's almost like the singer went through a second stage of puberty. It's the same voice, you're familiar with it, but everything just sounds a little bit deeper and thicker. And at the same time on games, everything has more of a hum to it. You know, if you're playing a racing game, the V8s are going to hum louder. But at the same time with this sound signature, you're not going to hear that transmission whine as you're flying through gears, or the blow-off valve of a turbo isn't going to cut through the engine bay as much as it did on a more V-shaped or traditional flat-sounding sound signature. So my result, because of this EQ or the stock sound profile, I struggled with Warzone and Apex, and it was worse on Valorant because Valorant is a very bass-heavy game in the first place. It requires quite a bit different EQ. This did not complement that well. Now, conversely, CSGO, it did excellent in, because that's a bass light game. It's more focused on higher frequencies, and as a result, I could turn it up a little bit more without any fatigue. On Call of Duty's Modern Warfare 2, playing more chaotic multiplayer matches, this sound signature was a little bit better because airstrikes and all this chaos didn't seem to be as loud or painful to listen to. It dulls that extreme loudness that comes from the game while still imaging well. So this is one of those things where as the scene gets more complex and chaotic at higher volumes, this headset excels more and more. It's almost like the more you ask it to do, the better it starts to perform compared to other headsets that will start to break up and struggle. That includes music as well. When it came to listening to things all the way from pop music to rock, heavy metal, and then going to my EDM and hip hop, well, actually even trap music. So open back headphones typically don't dig too deep in the lower bass. They roll off because there's no cup kind of creating some resistance for the driver. The driver moves more freely, and as a result, it can distort at higher volumes with low frequencies. There's no air pressure to help regulate it. So when you start EQing to bring some of that back, this as an open back had some of the best deep bass of any headset or headphone I own under $200. That includes pure audiophile products. So naturally, it makes sense to compare against other premium audiophile gaming headset and headphone products under $200. These have all been out for a while, and they have a similar idea to what Corsair is doing with the Virtuoso Pro. So I'm going to start with the Beyerdynamic Tiger 300R, which is the closest thing in sound performance to the Corsair Virtuoso Pro out of the box. It has a little bit of a bass shelf as well. It sounds a little bit warmer, but it doesn't carry as far into the mid, so it sounds less boxy. The upper mid-range and treble tuning is more similar as well. Not as sibilant, but still has a little bit more detail out of the box. It almost seems like, you turn up your mids and treble just slightly, but it even feels similar because these pads are very shallow and your ear rests on the baffle as well. Both of these perform exceptionally well for imaging. No detachable cord, no microphone, and it's the same price as this. So because of the build quality that you're still getting, the comparable driver matching, detachable cord, mic, all of that, I think the Corsair has an edge here just purely on value. Now where this becomes more difficult is when you look at these two. The Drop PC38X is arguably one of the best tuned gaming headset products out there that's not using digital signal processing. So like the Odyssey Maxwell is excellent, but much more expensive and has a chip to adjust the sound. The Drop PC38X is also an open back headset, and it sells anywhere from $130 to $180 depending on when you buy it. So it's a little bit less money. It has a flip to mute mic. There's no way to detach the mic. You're stuck with it, so it doesn't work normally as just a headphone. It's an excellent headset, and if you're playing on PlayStation and you have no ability to EQ, I would actually consider the Drop PC38X or the EPOS H6 Pro open back, which this admittedly is not tuned as well as the Drop PC38X. The only reason why I used the EPOS H6 Pro more than this is because it was more comfortable. I have the Dakoni pads on here, but the clamp force isn't as extreme. You have a detachable mic and a separate ground pin for the mic, so there's no crosstalk either. I absolutely love both of these. Both of these have volume jacks on it too, which can make it more convenient for console. However, what was crazy, and I think this is what some gamers are going to be looking for, is you still want your explosive bass that like a closed back gives you. If you're coming from like a HyperX or a Black Shark or Turtle Beach or SteelSeries headset to any of these, and you miss that low bass rumble and slam, the Corsair has more of it than any of these. So while these are excellent, people still might feel like they're missing something on the low end, and that's where the Corsair still edges it out. Purely for FPS with no EQ though, these are still something to consider even with the H6 Pro being discontinued. So that takes me to Sennheiser. The HD560S, amazing for FPS, very comfortable, often goes on sale for $150 or less. It sounds a little bit more harsh. It's more forward in the mid-range, which can be a little bit grainy or fatiguing at louder volumes. But if you're listening to it at a lower volume, it still has excellent detail retrieval. So it is good for gaming, and it does have a noticeably wider soundstage than the Corsair Virtuoso Pro out of the box. I really like this, but you know, it doesn't have a case. I don't think the bass texture is as good. It's kind of like a one-note bass delivery compared to the Corsair or the HD6XX, which I'll talk about. This is great as just an audio headphone, especially for the price. It's a good bang for your buck. You're getting a little bit less compared to this, but you're paying less. So it's still a good option, and I like the sound signature out of the box. The hardest part for me here is going to honestly be, if I had to narrow this down, it's between the drop PC38X, the Sennheiser HD6XX versus Corsair. So purely for music listening, the HD6XX for American people that have access to this is the best value under $200 for any headphone product. The mid-range clarity and texture that you get in the bass, this is like pure audiophile performance under 200. It's pretty remarkable. And I really love the upper mid-range tuning as well. It just does everything right. The only drawback to this is it does not play FPS as well as Corsair, and the sub bass is rolled off noticeably more. So if you listen a lot of rap or anything with heavy, deeper bass, or if you play games and you want more immersion and deeper, stronger bass, again, you're getting back into Corsair because with EQ, it could still do a great job elsewhere. All right, so we made it to the end of the video. I know this was crazy long, and hopefully you used the chapters if you didn't have a lot of time. The headset's not perfect. It's not without flaws, like the microphonics issues with the cables. I don't like the boxiness that the bass gives you. It's a little too heavy for me with a darkened profile. So it didn't sound as dynamic and fun. However, if you can EQ it, it goes from one of my lower preferred headsets to probably one of my favorites now. It's the only one that blends what I like about the Sennheiser HD6XX with gaming performance. It's amazing for gaming once EQ'd. It's comfortable enough. The mic is good enough. It's built like a tank. I love that Corsair used 3.5 millimeter universal jacks on the bottom, so I can buy an XLR cable like this that doesn't have microphonics, or use adapters and go full balanced in my creative DAC. If you're a PlayStation player using controller and you don't have the ability to EQ, you may like the Drop PC38X or the EPOS H6 Pro Open more. That's probably one of the only use cases where I feel like straight up that just might be a better option, because the mics are great there too. But if you can EQ or you don't mind the boxy sound, this is seriously impressive. The grills, the design, the build quality, all of these things line up enough to make it a really cohesive package. And because it takes the EQ so well, you can really make it however you like it. So great job to Corsair. I hope you found this really long video helpful. I promise they're not always this long, but don't forget to like and subscribe. I'd love to see you at the next one. Thank you so much for the support, and I will see you next time. Bye.